Welcome to the ExpertGate interview series, where we connect academia and industry to explore innovative solutions. I'm John, and today I have the distinct honor of speaking with Dr. Joseph Bazirake, a dedicated scholar and researcher with over a decade of experience in institutional transformation, governance, and policy development. His work spans critical university studies, social justice in academia, and impactful policy development, collaborating with institutions like Nelson Mandela University and the Makerere University. His insights are shaping the future of global education and higher education and academic governance on the continent. Dr. Bazirake, thank you so much for joining with us today. Let's jump
Thank
straight
you.
in. Would you provide a brief overview of your professional journey and share what inspired you to specialize in your field?
Thank you, John, and such a beautiful introduction. I really appreciate it. I couldn't have said it any better than you did. So my profession up to this point is actually shaped by an interaction of experiences in academia. So I get to the point that I am through an interest in how society works. The intrigue of how power, operates within society. So I have evolved over time to grow an interest in social systems and the institutions within them, and especially the idea that they are static, like you put it in the introduction, but also that they are constantly changing. And how that eventually affects the most vulnerable within those societies within through those changes. So my journey then begins at the flagship university of Makerere University in Kampala, Uganda, where I did my first degree in political science with a specialization in international relations and diplomatic studies. And at the same university, I pursued a master's in peace and conflict studies, still all around understanding power dynamics and how they operate at different levels, be it local, national, and international. So that was my kind of interest at the time. And about 10 years ago, I moved to South Africa, partly to pursue a PhD, but also to be involved more with students at the University of the Free State in South Africa. And there, I was intrigued even more by the university itself as an entity. I was intrigued by the university as a social entity, and I changed focus to want to look at it. So while I was mentoring students as leaders, mostly student leaders, but also first-year students, trying to navigate the university, I was also working with staff on training in their diversity and inclusivity training and conflict resolution trainings. And in all that, I was just constantly intrigued by the structure of the university, the history of the university, why it does what it does, and how that affects the different constituents that it has. And so then I focused on the university for my PhD research, which was on institutional change. I was theorizing institutional change in South African universities. And so that's how I get there through, the transdisciplinary elements coming together
Mm-hmm.
and focus on the university as an institution.
Oh, that's very intriguing, Dr. Bazarake. I mean, you were working in this environment, the same environment that you're working in, and you're also studying and
Yeah,
observing and trying to understand the institutional change and that
yeah.
as an organism and as an environment itself, right? Now, look, Dr. Bazarake, now at Expertgate, you're going to actively engage in research and collaboration that bridges policy, leadership, and academic practice. But what types of projects or partnerships are you most excited to explore through
Mhm.
Expertgate, and how do they align with your work in transforming higher education?
Thank you, John. I am excited about the kind of platform that you've, given to us at ExpertGate, especially because of that interlinkage, that thinking about the university, thinking about the society, and thinking about industry, at the same time. And I believe that calls for a certain form of interdisciplinarity, a certain way of being able to shift from one frame to another. And so for me, as really an interdisciplinary scholar at this point, I would be very interested in looking at projects that focus critically at the university. And critically here is not about criticizing. Some people think we criticize the university. We rather want to look at the university in the way it does what it does and how differently it can do what it does. John, the challenge, of course, is that a lot is changing around the university, and yet quite often universities want to stick to what they are and how they do things, whether it's how they govern or how they teach or how they engage with students. And yet, given, for example, AI, the fifth industrial revolution, we need to think about how the university can still be at the forefront of these changes and be able to prepare the students for these changes outside the university. So my interest is really to have a focus on the university. This can be curriculum related, can be governance related, but most importantly, that the university can still be worked with as a micro, as a picture of society. What society is can still be seen through the university, and that can operate in two ways. So the university can push certain changes, that can happen outside of itself, but at the same time, the university needs to be open to receiving the changes happening outside of itself to be able to stay at the forefront. Yeah.
Yes, like the whole thing about having a two-way dialogue, almost, right, and for it to be reflective of society,
Yeah.
and not be just held back and left behind on the shelf somewhere, right? Now,
Yes.
Dr.
Yes.
Bazirake, your work has a profound impact on institutional change and social justice. Now, how do you see your research and academic initiatives contributing towards positive social impact, particularly
Mm,
within the communities and industries that you work with?
mm, mm. So because my current community of work is really the body within the university, the student
Yes.
body, the people who teach within the university, my research approach, my research engagements are really, geared towards making sure that ensuring that whoever is involved within the practices of the university can be, in a way, part of the decision making that then happens there. Because that's the first step. The way universities tend to be structured, it tends to marginalize certain groups, especially students in this case. And we saw that in South Africa through the 2015s to about 2017, 18, with the student movements, the Must Fall movement. All these were desperate calls for student voices to be included, to be heard, so that if there's changes in how fees structures operate, they need to take students' needs and students' concerns into consideration. So. So that's key for me, that the university can be responsive to these kinds of changes, that the university can be also a part of the social justice movement in whichever form that can manifest itself, rather than a place that might be part of the marginalization that we would all desire to walk away from. So that's the kind of that in whatever the university does, it still is able to be relevant and be responsive and be able to take care of the constituents within it.
Yes, the last thing that you want is to have a university be exclusionary towards the
Yes,
students, right? And now I'd like to
exactly.
ask, just as a bit of a follow-up to what you are talking about, Dr. Bazirake, in what ways do you think that academic reforms can drive broader social and economic change? How do you think these kind of reforms can drive this?
Yes, I think the interaction across between academic institutions and society needs to be more emphasized,
Mm,
especially now with as we know it, with the move in technology and AI, for example,
mhm,
um, how that can be, integrated very closely with the students and the people who teach at the university and the people who administer the universities. But most importantly, I think it would be helpful for universities and to build on that collaboration that they already have with communities and industry, but to be more intentional about how that works,
mm,
and to be more practical about how students, especially, can be prepared for for work in industry or beyond industry. I'll give an example of what the African universities are now contending with.
yes.
You have universities that prepare students for what doesn't exist anymore outside the universities. So students graduate and then they have to start all over again to try and figure out how to, to operate within society, because the
Mhm,
two have sort of shifted and the university
mm,
still produces the same student, but for a changed society. So I believe it's important to have that linkage and to grow it more intentionally, so that the products of universities are even more relevant within the society that they're
mm,
produced for. And this is not just the local. You see, it's the local, it's the national, it's the global. So those have to come together in some way. That as you prepare the students locally, you still have a global focus around what they're doing, because that's where we are headed as a society. So on one hand, we can't stay away from the global movements. On the other hand, we need people who are also rooted within the contexts that they're based within, the context they're groomed, so that they can better navigate the pressures that come with the current speed at which
yes.
society is moving. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
the world is certainly developing very, very quickly around us,
Yes.
and society is definitely changing. Now, speaking about changing society and development, now look, Expertgate, Dr. Bazirake, we are committed to reinvesting
Mhm.
50% of all of our profits into developing curricula and teaching initiatives centered on Industry 5.0, right? So
Mhm.
now this
Mhm.
is with a special focus on underprivileged communities
Mhm.
worldwide. So, Dr.
Mhm.
Bazirake, from your perspective, how can these efforts be further enhanced? And what do you think of the roles that universities and industries can play in maximizing this effort?
Mhm. And I applaud you, ExpertGate, for such a different way of looking at how you conduct an enterprise and contribute, and still and still be able to put experts and people who might need experts in certain
Mm,
fields together. And I think your key role here can also relate to enhancing collaborations, which you're already doing by through this platform, collaborations between experts or people who have certain experiences, or people who are able to do certain things that um, other people might need. But also, I see the need for a certain form of knowledge democratization, that I believe you can be part of as ExpertGate, that I can be part of as, working with ExpertGate. Ensuring that knowledge is not just left within universities, that the interaction of knowledge goes beyond just being within the libraries, within the universities, but also to communities. And maybe part of that would be around open access, even publishing, and ways that interaction between the university and,
Mm,
and
mm.
and communities can just be enriching. So this platform is, for me, one big move, and it's practical in the way it has laid out its intentions. Putting experts and people together, but at the same time, taking the move to be intentional about dedicating some of the proceeds, and not just some, but equal part proportion of proceeds to doing exactly that. So thank you that you have established such a framework for us to even learn from and be part of. Yeah.
Yeah, so Dr. Bazirake, for us, our whole mission is really to unite, to reunite, right, industry and academia.
Mm-hmm.
The whole idea of knowledge, knowledge and theory is good and all. And as you mentioned earlier, um,
Mm-hmm.
where the students are learning certain things from universities, but when they go into the real world, they have to learn a whole different set of skills, right? And this is what we're here for, right? To reunite this, the knowledge and practice,
Mm-hmm.
academia and industry, and in the
Mm-hmm.
East and the West, right? So the experts
Mm-hmm.
from globally. Um, Now, I want to ask, moving forward, as we transition into Industry 5.0, Dr.
Mm-hmm.
Bazirake, as you know, technology is set to really
Mm-hmm.
revolutionize education. Now, how do you
Mm-hmm.
envision this shift shaping the
Mm-hmm.
future of higher education, particularly in preparing
Mm-hmm.
students for a human-centered,
Mm-hmm.
AI-driven workforce?
Yes, I believe it's going to be very key for higher education, for universities to embrace many of the things they're very slow to embrace around AI and Chat GPT and all these other pieces that are coming together. Because at the moment, I see the move is to try and dissuade, students especially from applying any of these things. But these things, in a way, are helping students to start from a different place. No longer having to have to probably have whole notebooks of facts, but can start from a place of that if this information is available, how else can we move on? Because that's what it
Mm,
is. So the skills to be able to interface with that, and not the same skills that really are being emphasized at the university. I believe it's going to call for a lot of interdisciplinary, approaches, a lot of ways of synthesizing beyond. Yes, the specialist fields are important and they need to be, continually upheld. But you're still going to need that way of interacting with different forms of knowledges,
mm,
that can only be dealt with through even the appreciation and use of AI. So I believe that the fifth industrial revolution, as it is going to really call for us as humans to work alongside technology, to work alongside automation, to work alongside, not because automation is not doing, is not um, as widespread as it should be, but because at least we have a different starting point. We can use that
mm,
as a starting point for more, and to emphasize things like the ethics of AI, the ethics of this new technological wave, and what we can, work with, and what we need to maybe steer away from, because the opportunities are endless. There's so
Yes.
much that can be done. So just to be able to measure that, to work measuredly with that, I think would be very important for universities to embrace, and for us to think about, in the turn of technology as it is right now.
Yeah, definitely does, Dr. Bazirake. I mean, AI right now, it's a whole wellspring of knowledge. And when
Mm.
you utilize it as a tool, you get a different kind of starting point, right?
Yes.
Like you mentioned, the technical aspects, yes, very, very important. But more
Yes.
so nowadays with moving with AI and using that as a tool, you're looking
Mm.
into ethics, you're looking at the how you can apply it and how to use it, the critical
Mhm.
thinking abilities of those
Mhm.
students, right? Well, look,
Mhm.
Dr. Bazareke, thank you so much for sharing your inspiring journey and deep insights today. Your
Mhm.
work in transforming higher education and driving social change is paving the way for a more equitable and dynamic future in academia. Now, to our
Thank you.
audience, if you want to learn more about Dr. Bazarake's groundbreaking work and explore how ExpertGate is bridging academia and industry, please visit us at expertgate.org. And remember, this is ExpertGate for everyone, everywhere.